Hi, everyone. This is Lisa Wessell, your women's health nurse practitioner and owner of Encompass Women's Health. I am here today with my good friend Diane. We are kind of wanting to transition our model or what we're doing from Instagram and TikTok and Facebook to kind of get off of Meta and transitioning to YouTube for a lot of different reasons, but also allowing us to have longer discussions, more questions. And I mean, they can be short too, as well, too, but kind of going to see how this works and if people like it. I prefer it because I get to be with Diane and she gets to ask me questions, and it's a little nicer since I'm 51 and really not comfortable getting on my phone and doing all of that. So this hopefully will be a good transition and a good way for us to communicate. And here's Diane if you want to say anything today.
Yes, hello. First, thank you very much for letting me interview you. I get to work with Lisa behind the scenes, and it's just really a lot of fun. And I'm excited for this format because, yes, we get to hang out and ask questions and laugh and make the overwhelming amount of information for this phase of life hopefully a little more digestible.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. So today we thought we'd kick off talking about the black box label, its origins, where it came from, and why it is being removed from all estrogen products.
Yeah, so let's let's talk about that. So the announcement came out about, I think, November, about removing the black box label on estrogen products. It I think they don't have to do it for the next 6 months, or like it has to be off of everything in the next 6 months. And I would imagine like that's a product, like things are, they have all these things already sitting in storage kind of thing. So, but regard the package stuff. The black box warning is on all estrogen products, basically stating that estrogen increases your risk of cancer, it increases your risk of cardiovascular disease, stroke, particularly breast cancer, increased risk of Alzheimer's. So like it basically is telling you, and what a black box warning is when there is significant findings of a product, they have to list that on the label as a possible consequence of its use, essentially. And the WHI study is where that came from. So most of us have heard by now, like, or if you, is the WHI study, which was one of the biggest studies in relationship to the use of hormone replacement therapy. It was started in 1981 and it was supposed to go to 2005.
Mhm.
However, based on the findings of the WHI study, particularly the estrogen progesterone arm, they ended the study in 2002 because of the increase risk of breast cancer that they were finding, so they stopped the study. The actual part of the study continued to go on until 2004, and that was just the arm of the study where women were only using estrogen. But based on that study is where that black box warning came from because of the findings of that. And basically, we have learned over the past 23 years that the study was flawed. And I always try to say this, like, you still, like, even in a bad thing, you learn something, right? So it wasn't completely this horrible
Uh-huh.
study. We learned a lot from that. And so it did change the course of hormone replacement therapy for the past 2 decades. But we're kind of coming back around to it and making changes and realizing that wasn't accurate. There is some truth to that. Like, for example, I would tell you that we know that oral estrogen does increase our risk for clotting. And so when I say that, what's interesting when you say clotting, what I've realized is people think you're talking about like clotting, like menstrual blood clotting, like I'm clotting. And I'm like, no, no, no. When a healthcare provider is saying,
That's
yeah, that's what people think of. And then because from my perspective, you're like, clotting, do you have any risk of clotting? People are like, well, I have, you're like, no, no, no. They are talking about clotting in your vessels, in your arteries, like increased risk of stroke, increased risk of a
okay.
cardiovascular event. So it is a disconnect from, like, as a provider doing this and a client or a patient, like what you're thinking are two different things. So people will be like, yeah, I have clotting. You're like, wait, what? No. So we know this, that oral estrogen increases our risk of clotting. It's how it's metabolized when we take things orally and it's processed through the liver. It's just the metabolites of it. And that is there, and that has always been there. For example, if you are on birth control and that is a form of oral estrogen, there is an increased risk of clotting or having a stroke. Okay. Now, I always tell
Okay.
people this: when you're 20, your likelihood of having a stroke is pretty low, pretty low. When you're 50, that's a little different because we have
Mhm.
increase in cardiovascular risks as we get older. And so that has always been there. That is nothing new. But when they were doing the WHI study, women were taking oral estrogen also, and they were also in their 60s. And so they were at an increased risk anyways, if that makes sense.
And
I don't know if I answered the question.
correct me if I'm wrong, they were also smokers.
Yeah, so like 70% of the WHI study, 70% of the women were current or past smokers. The average age was like, I want to say 63, something to that effect. And also, I want to say statistically, the 70% keeps like I don't know if that's exactly correct. Were considered obese, and not that
Ah,
it's a big thing to be obese. Like it's really not that hard to be obese. Like I was like, I don't know, you could be like 10 pounds overweight and you're considered obese. So like again, like we're talking
yeah.
BMI, and there's a whole slew of things there, but it's not like we took healthy non-smoking women and we're like, okay, what happens if we do this? I think the other thing too to keep in mind is like there are women out there on Premarin, and that was the drug that was the hormone that they were using, which is a pregnant horse's urine. We still don't know how like there's over 80 metabolites that we still don't know what they do in our body. Our body doesn't know what to do with that. It doesn't understand what it is essentially. And this is where it's like this balance. Like as a provider, not being a provider like back when it came out, I wasn't a nurse practitioner at that time. If you are on Premarin and you are 70 years old and you're doing fine with it, it's fine. It's just one of those things we've
Mhm.
learned. So I don't want people to be like, "Oh my god, I shouldn't be on oral estrogen." I don't start people on oral estrogen. There is a time and a place for that, but it's a discussion about it. My philosophy on oral estrogen is this. It is hard enough, it has been hard enough to work with other providers like a primary care and myself. Someone finds out that someone's on oral estrogen or estrogen at all, and if they've had anything, they're like, "You shouldn't be on this. It causes this, this, and this." And so I just don't put people on oral estrogen for that reason. I have many clients that have come to me that are on it. Do I continue to prescribe it? Yes. Do I have a discussion, like a shared decision, like, "Hey, I just want you to be aware, there is an increased risk. However, you've been on this for 20 years. Are we okay? You're doing
Right.
fine." Like the black box warning is coming off. And it'll be interesting to see what happens, how other providers feel about this moving forward. I think there is still a time and a place. It's still a discussion. It is still a very personal decision and like based on your individual health history and your comfort level. So
Mhm.
we know that estrogen doesn't, what we've learned is it's not the cause of cancer or breast cancer, but it can feed a cancer that's already there, right? So I guess that would be my argument when people like don't want to do mammograms or don't want to do, I'm like, and want to be on hormone replacement therapy. You're also a grown woman. You can make your own healthcare choices, but I do think it's smart to have the proper, like the screening done. And some people, like, if you want to choose to do an ultrasound, you don't want to do a mammogram, do an ultrasound. Like, do something that we have some screenings there. We also know if we're talking about hormones in general from the WHI study, it was also, it was all the synthetics. It was the man made versions of things. And so it was the progesterone was a synthetic version. And I always have to think about this. So it was Provera, and Vera is the synthetic version of progesterone. We really want to stick to a micronized progesterone or prometrium. And I remember that because it has an M in it and mom is good. So I remember it. And I have to go Provera. I do. It's like I have to keep it. Provera is very bad. So I have to, that's how I kind of remember because you can easily forget that. But when you're taking progesterone, it'll be interesting. I wonder, you know what? I don't even think there's a black box warning on progesterone. I think it's only on estrogen because in the WHI study,
Hmm.
what we have found was the increased risk of breast cancer was in the arm of the study where women were taking estrogen, Premarin estrogen, and Provera, and not in the arm of the study where they were just taking estrogen. And so then basically they've broken it down and we're like the increased risk is for women when women are using the synthetic progesterone, even though what we have found is that was a small increase. It wasn't statistically significant, but it was a little more, so they
Uh-huh.
think it's because of the synthetic progesterone piece of it. So yeah, and that's what we have found, essentially. You have someone if someone is actively going through cancer treatments, actively, like, newly diagnosed, should we be doing hormones? Probably not. We need to kind of figure out everything that's going on with that. There are studies that support the use of, like, does it mean you can never be on it? No, I'm not an oncologist. It's and so like it is a discussion and it's a comfort level and it's a shared decision making thing. There are studies that are showing that like not having women on hormone replacement therapy, whether they've had breast cancer or not, they tend to do better like on and living, how do they feel? How do you feel as you're here on this planet for the next however long? There's that aspect of it and the protectiveness of hormone replacement therapy. And I think the biggest thing is we as a society focus on the negatives. And so like as women, we're like it's been driven into our head like we should be super concerned about breast cancer, but more of us die from heart disease. And then you look
Uh,
at like their women have more Alzheimer's than men, and like what an awful, awful disease that has no cure. And so we really want to work on prevention as well too. And hormones is one of those. It's not the only thing, like we should not be drinking, we should be exercising, we should be eating. There's so many compounding variables. It's not ever just one thing. And so at the same time, it's not just one thing that's the cause as well too.
no, I was just gonna if I'm hearing you correctly, just to see if I understand it in my non-provider brain, it really is a discussion based on several factors. It's not black or white. It's not yes or no. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking, well, God, before I went on hormone replacement therapy, my body hurt. The last thing I wanted to do was exercise or move. Everything hurt. I was, tired. I wasn't sure if I was going crazy. Like I just didn't feel like myself. So I didn't want to eat healthy. Yet those also increased my risk for significant health
Yeah.
events. So making the
Yeah. I
decision
feel like,
to go on hormone replacement
yeah.
therapy, I feel so much better now that I feel
Yeah.
I wanna move and stay healthier. So it's is the juice worth the squeeze?
Right. And it's like the snowball effect in the positive direction and the negative. So to me, it's like a form of depression. Like if you're not, you know what I mean? Like it's hard to get out of bed when you are like in a
Uh-huh.
severe depressive state. And like it's just you can't, you know what I mean? Like nothing else matters. And so it happens with our health and hormones. And I think the good thing about where we are right now is that it's being talked about and women are sharing stories where I would say like 10 years ago they weren't. Like people didn't really talk about
Uh-huh.
this. Women don't talk about their vagina. Like I had they don't talk about sex. They don't talk about like enjoying all of these things, like that we're supposed to be, it's okay. We do better as women in a group. We do better sharing. That is like our superpower. And the more that we talk, the more that we communicate, the more that we share. Like, because if you just stick into your own head, can be a bit kind of messed up there. But I think that's for me, that's one of the things I've learned is like, I don't think I'm crazy. I mean, maybe a little, but like I have these thoughts. For me, my like hormone like off ramp was like rage. I rage. Like I was not I just had like, why am I so like this doesn't feel normal that like I want to throw you out the
Right.
window? Like my response seemed like there's like the logical part of you, like my response, this seems like you might be overreacting. But the other part is like, hell no, you're not. You're not overreacting. Like they deserve this. And so yeah, like I think that's the thing is I remember saying to my provider, I have a lot of anger. Like I'm really ragey and I don't think this is normal. And I was told that that was just my personality. You have a lot of energy, Lisa. Like, and I was like, I mean,
Oh,
okay.
the gaslighting, and I feel
Yep.
like I had a similar experience. My first provider that I went to, I was bleeding so heavy, like, I was like, "This is not normal. I don't know what's wrong with me. Is it cancer? Is something wrong with does my back hurt because there's, like, a tumor?" I catastrophize
Yeah.
anyway, and she literally grabbed her belly and I gained a lot of weight, and she grabbed her belly, and she's like, "Welcome to the club, sister." And that was it. Like, I'm like, "What club? I don't wanna be in this club." Like,
Yep.
I need more because it should be easier. And then I had another wonderful provider, who experienced breast cancer at a very young age, and she blew my mind when it came to HRT. She's like, "Oh, no, absolutely. It's not what it seems. I've done a lot of research, and yes, you should consider going on it." And it just really like, okay, so I got 2 very different answers from
Mhm.
providers, and it's confusing, which didn't then I was like, "Well, I don't know who to talk to because who do I trust to talk to?"
Right. And you second I mean, you do, like, you it's hard, there's so much information out there, it goes, out of both sides of the mouth, and all you can I mean, I think that's I don't know, to me, it was I've had that happen a lot with my clients, like, we've been doing hormones, they feel great, they went and saw their primary care, their primary was like, "You can't be on this because of X, Y, and Z," and, just pull in research and, like, "Here, like, honestly, like, this is your decision, you get to make the decision that you want to make. And here is the research that you can read through and you can look at. Like because it's out there, So one of the I would say off on a little, sidebar, like one of the big
Mhm.
things that will come back is if people have had a clot. So when I mean like a clot, like a deep vein thrombosis, they have had a stroke, something. Okay. So it's not that simple. Like, well, what was the circumstances for that? This so basically this would be this the scenario. They were on birth
Uh-huh.
control, they were in their 40s, they ended up having a deep vein thrombosis after having surgery.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of the Black Box Label Chat. Before you click to watch part 2, be sure to like and subscribe to the Encompass Women's Health channel so you can be the first to know when a new chat is available.